You don't belong here. The words hit harder than the TSA pat-down Marcus Reed had just endured. Karen Walsh didn't whisper them, didn't even lower her voice. She fired them across the Prestige Airways first-class lounge like a flare shot in broad daylight. Daring anyone to challenge her, Marcus, dressed in a tailored charcoal gray travel suit with no flashy labels, stood tall, a platinum boarding pass in one hand, his phone recording in the other, behind Karen. A small crowd had gathered, some whispering, some pretending not to notice, but a few openly recording. Harold Vance, a balding man with a smug smirk and a suede carry-on slung over one shoulder, leaned toward Karen with theatrical flair. I told you, he slipped someone $300 to print that pass. Can't have just anyone slipping into first class? The sneer in his voice was casual, worn in, like he'd practiced it. Karen chuckled without looking at Marcus and clicked her tablet with finality. This lounge is for Prestige Priority Elite members only. You're not on the list. Marcus remained composed, his gaze steady but unreadable. Would you like to scan the barcode? It updates in real time. He offered. Karen didn't move. Her eyes were scanning him, not his pass. She tilted her head. That won't be necessary. I've already flagged your credentials. Security appeared. Paul Carter, a broad-shouldered man with a shiny security badge and an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Sir, he said, in that tired, false calm tone that often precedes escalation, we're going to have to ask you to leave the lounge until this can be verified. Marcus didn't flinch. And while you're verifying, am I allowed to wait quietly? Or should I just kneel with my hands behind my head to speed things up? There was a beat of silence, thick and electric. Then Harold chimed in again. We've got standards here. This isn't a bus station. Someone laughed. A woman near the coffee machine glanced at her husband, who grimaced and stepped between her and Marcus. The room felt smaller. Marcus calmly held up his phone, still recording. Ms. Walsh, I'm giving you a final chance to reconsider how this plays out. If you continue to violate federal passenger protections and your airline's own policies, you may not like what happens next. Karen's face twisted into mock concern. Is that a threat? No, Marcus said. It's a guarantee. Karen raised her hand slightly and nodded toward Paul. Without waiting for further dialogue, the security supervisor gestured toward the exit. As Marcus began walking, escorted like a trespasser in a private club, Karen muttered under her breath, but loud enough for the mics on Marcus's phone to pick up. You people are always trying to game the system. That line was the fuse. Across the gate terminal, Naomi Carter's eyes narrowed behind her sunglasses. Sitting quietly near gate 47, she tapped a command into her phone. Protocol Eclipse. Stage 1 initiated. Elsewhere, Malik Young, a 23-year-old intern for Reed Enterprises, raised his camera, panning from Karen's smirk to the security officer walking a composed, dignified Marcus, past glaring passengers and digital screens, flashing Flight PA-218 to San Francisco, delayed. Malik posted the clip to TikTok under one word. Typical. The video gained 25,000 views in the first 3 minutes, 7 million by the end of the hour. Karen didn't know yet, but she'd just become the face of a corporate reckoning. Sarah, a younger gate agent with tightly braided hair and a nervous energy, stepped out from behind the counter. Ma'am, if his pass was valid. Karen snapped. Back to your post, Sarah. Sarah paused. Scanning Marcus's boarding code with her phone, it lit up green. She bit her lip but stayed silent. At a nearby information desk, Ryan Holt, Prestige's contracted IT tech, watched his tablet flicker. 2 errors appeared in the flight assignment logs. Booking status, unknown override. He frowned. That's not normal, he whispered. Already screen recording. back at the lounge's exit. Harold couldn't resist a final jab. "You'll probably sue or start a GoFundMe or something, huh?" Marcus stopped just before the automatic doors. His voice was calm, clipped. "No, I'm going to fix the airline industry, starting with yours." Paul raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. The air in the terminal shifted. Passengers who had laughed moments ago now whispered, sensing that something was happening that was much bigger than a denied lounge entry. "You'll regret this," Marcus said. Not in anger, but like someone stating tomorrow's weather. He handed his platinum card to Paul. "Scan it, then check the system logs." Paul hesitated, glancing at Karen. "Scan it." Marcus repeated. Paul did. The screen blinked green. "Priority elite. Confirmed." Paul's face flushed. "Looks like the system must have been glitching earlier." "Or someone was," Marcus replied. "Keep the card." Then he turned, walking toward the main concourse as Sarah stood frozen, caught between policy and principle at that moment. Malik's TikTok hit 2 million views. The comments lit up. "This is why we film." Dude kept his cool. "Mad respect. This airline just signed its own death warrant." Vivian Moore, 67, watched the video from her hotel suite 3 blocks away. Her breath caught at Karen's slur. She had mentored Marcus since he was 19, after his first software patent had been stolen and white-labeled by a California firm that later claimed he was just a summer intern. Back then, he was an orphan from Atlanta with nothing but a refurbished laptop and an idea no one would take seriously until it made their servers obsolete. Now, he was the CEO of Reed Enterprises, worth over $14 billion and under contract with 3 federal agencies, including the SEC and Department of Defense. Vivian smiled grimly. "They don't know who they just pushed," she murmured. Marcus had spent decades fighting not just for success, but to end the culture of gatekeeping that had once kept him sleeping in a bus terminal in Tuscaloosa when he couldn't afford hotel deposits. Naomi texted him a screenshot. "Protocol Eclipse, live stream in 3 mini, phase 2 ready." Marcus sent back one word, "proceed," from within the airline's internal Slack. Malik leaked a chat where Karen had joked 2 months prior, "Gotta watch those special class passengers. They love their fake VIP passes." The screenshot flooded Reddit. "Discrimination with a timestamp." One user wrote, "Hope they've got lawyers." Ryan, watching the systems misfire again, uploaded a screen capture of the green-flagged boarding pass alongside the system logs to YouTube. "This should have never happened," he said in the video, his voice steady, his face pale. Within an hour, over 500,000 views and climbing. At Gate 47, as passengers waited to board flight PA-218, a murmur began. "Wasn't that the guy from TikTok? Why'd they drag him out if his pass was real? This is the same airline that lost that vet's wheelchair last month." Sarah, still shaken, made a quiet choice. She posted a still frame of Karen blocking Marcus at the lounge door to her Instagram story with a single caption, "I tried." That post, too, would go viral. But by then, Prestige Airways would already be spiraling. The chaos of the lounge hadn't ended Marcus's journey. It had launched it. In that moment, the humiliation intended to break him had activated a quiet fury long refined into precision. And now, with cameras rolling and networks watching, the stage was set. Within 12 hours, the name Prestige Airways wouldn't inspire luxury. It would be synonymous with ruin. The countdown had begun. The gate to Prestige Airways flight PA-218 should have been a place of routine, a quick scan, a nod, and smooth boarding. Instead, it had become a war zone of whispers and digital fire. Karen Walsh stood stiff at the boarding counter, her lips tight, her stylus trembling slightly as she stabbed at her tablet again and again. Systems glitching, she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. But then she looked up and saw Marcus Reed walking back toward the gate. Calm, steady, flanked by a quiet storm of eyes, cameras, and momentum. "I thought I told you," she began, but Marcus cut her off with a raised hand. "You did," he said coolly, "but your system didn't. It says I'm cleared. Platinum Elite. Priority boarding. Boarding Group 0. Karen's mouth opened to reply, but before she could speak, Paul Carter appeared, looking strained, his face pale. "There's a flag on his file." Paul said, "Threat alert. Issued 10 minutes ago." He turned the screen toward them. Marcus didn't blink. "That would be the same system that flagged my valid boarding pass as fraudulent?" he asked. Harold Vance was back too, lounging against the wall, arms crossed like an amused spectator. "Maybe the system knows something we don't," he muttered, pulling out his phone and filming Marcus with exaggerated flair. "This guy's dangerous. Who knew elite status came with a side of cybercrime?" Karen snorted. "Wouldn't surprise me. We've seen how he operates." The statement landed hard, loud enough for nearby passengers to pause. A few gasps. A camera click. Sarah, still behind the desk, looked up sharply. "This is wrong," she said under her breath. "You know it is." Paul ignored her. "Mr. Reed, I'm issuing you a standby pass. Until we can verify your security status, you'll need to wait." Marcus looked down at the ticket Paul printed, a downgraded seat marked SSSS, the TSA's code for additional screening. It wasn't just a delay, it was a digital scarlet letter. "You're making a mistake," he said again. Quieter now. Harold leaned toward his camera and spoke like a late-night host. "Twitter poll. Should we let this guy back on the flight? Or should he Uber to San Fran?" A passenger nearby laughed, but another shifted uncomfortably. The mood was turning, uncertainty creeping in. Sarah stepped forward. "His name is Marcus Reed," she said softly, but firmly. "CEO of Reed Enterprises." Karen rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. Check the badge on his bag," Sarah insisted, "and maybe Google him while you're at it." Paul hesitated. Something in Sarah's voice cut through the noise. But before anyone could act, the screens behind the gate glitched again, flickering between flight updates and red error codes. Ryan Holt, standing by with his laptop open, saw it first. The gate management dashboard was scrambling names, randomly bumping passengers to standby. "Systems compromised," he whispered, eyes wide. "Something's wrong. This isn't normal." On another monitor, boarding groups vanished. Then the screen went dark. Ryan pulled out his phone, started a YouTube live stream. "If you're flying Prestige today, check your boarding pass again. Something's happening." Naomi Carter, seated in an unmarked SUV just outside the terminal, caught the glitch in real time. Her tablet lit up with alerts. Internal flight data corruption. "That's phase 2, she said aloud. "Time for leverage." In the back seat, Malik forwarded another screen capture. This time, from the internal employee Slack channel, Edward Lang, the CEO of Prestige Airways, had just sent a private message to legal counsel. "Initiate protocol to isolate the Reed situation. Kill feeds. Secure logs." Silence. "Sarah." Malik sent it straight to Ryan, who reposted it to Twitter with a single caption. "They knew." Within 4 minutes, the post reached 8 million views. Ryan's live stream hit 500,000 concurrent watchers, most sharing screenshots of their own corrupted bookings. "This isn't about a seat anymore," one commenter typed. "It's sabotage." In a nearby waiting area, 2 women who had quietly watched Marcus's ordeal approached the counter. "Is this the guy they tried to kick out earlier?" one asked Sarah. "Because my app just downgraded me too, and I paid full first class." Sarah nodded. It's systemic. I think he was just the first domino. At that moment, Marcus received a silent notification on his phone. Ticket validation confirmed by FAA. He turned it toward Karen. You need to fix this. Now. Karen stood frozen. Paul looked at the screen again, then at Marcus. You're cleared, he said reluctantly. But we don't have a seat assigned anymore. There's been a reshuffle. Harold laughed. Guess you'll be riding jump seat. Partner. Marcus smiled faintly. I won't be riding anything with prestige. Karen's expression twisted. So what? You're gonna sue? No, Marcus replied. I'm going to make you irrelevant. The gate terminal filled with the sharp ping of notifications. Naomi had just uploaded a short video, Marcus's original boarding pass scan, with the timestamp and verification log, proving he had been valid from the start. The tweet read, "They lied. Here's proof." It spread like wildfire. 25 million views within the hour, picked up by Twitter moments, reshared by public figures, and analyzed by aviation influencers. Sarah's next move sealed the protest. She sat on the floor in front of the gate, arms folded, and said nothing. Just sat there, silently refusing to process the next passenger. A ripple of gasps followed. 2 other junior staff members did the same. Within minutes, #GateSittin trended, not because of hashtags, but because passengers were posting photos and captions organically. My first-class flight is delayed because a staff member took a stand. I support her. They tried to kick out a black CEO, and now the whole terminal is watching. Marcus stood still, hands clasped in front of him, as cameras and phones circled like satellites. He didn't need to say anything. The video clips, the screenshots, the lies, they spoke for him now. Naomi's final message for the hour came through a private channel. Ready for Phase 3. External audit leak. Marcus nodded to no one in particular, turned on his heel, and walked away from the gate. The lounge may have been the spark, but this gate had become the battlefield. And with each insult hurled, each system glitched, each whisper recorded, Prestige Airways had not just humiliated a man, they had empowered a reckoning. Edward Lang watched the live stream from his office at Prestige Airways Atlanta headquarters, his knuckles white against the polished edge of his desk. "Shut it down," he barked into the intercom. "Get someone to kill that feed. I want Reed off my property, immediately." But it was too late. As the live stream climbed past 2 million views, Edward sent a direct order through the secure Slack channel. "Flag Reed as a security threat. Make it stick. I don't care how." Moments later. At Gate 47, the monitors behind the counter flickered again. Paul Carter stared at them, beads of sweat forming on his forehead as he read the override message. A blinking red alert now marked Marcus Reed as disruptive VIP, manual review required. Karen grinned with satisfaction. "That ought to settle it." Harold Vance, ever the opportunist, stepped closer to Marcus and whispered, "Looks like your little rebellion didn't last long, huh?" Marcus didn't respond. He calmly slid his phone into his coat pocket, eyes moving from Paul to Karen, then to the boarding screen. "Edward Lang just made his final mistake," he said quietly. Karen laughed. "You're not that important." "No," Marcus replied, "but I am that prepared." Paul hesitated, uncomfortable now. He had once trained under federal aviation protocols. He knew Marcus's background wasn't just important. Reed Enterprises powered the cybersecurity grid for both Homeland Security and the FAA. And now the man whose pass he'd voided was clearly someone you didn't humiliate lightly. Karen stepped forward. "Let's not drag this out. Mr. Reed, you're not cleared for boarding. Your profile's been locked. This is a private carrier. We reserve the right to refuse service." Her words echoed across the gate, Sarah stood frozen near the kiosk. Ryan Holt's screen now showed a silent stream of booking reassignments. Every few seconds, random passengers were bumped off standby lists and reassigned in error. "This isn't just a glitch," he muttered. "It's a meltdown." Just then, Harold leaned against the counter and made a show of opening Twitter. "Time to have some fun," he muttered. He typed, "VIP passenger causes terminal chaos. Was it worth it? Should he be banned?" He attached a photo of Marcus and posted the poll. Within 2 minutes, it hit trending. The top comment read, "He's about to own your airline. Harold, better pack a parachute." The crowd around the gate grew louder. Some passengers shouted at Karen. Others filmed Paul escorting Marcus away from the counter. "Are they kicking him off again?" someone yelled. "This is harassment." Marcus remained composed. He turned to Paul. "Before you follow through on that order," he said, "check the ticket logs from an hour ago. Look at the audit trail on the system." Paul pulled out his handheld terminal. The logs were corrupted. The entire block of data, Marcus's ticket scans, boarding status, and seat assignment, was wiped clean. Just one blinking line remained. "Override logged by admin, E. Lang." Paul blinked. This came from the top." "Exactly," Marcus said. "You're being used to cover his mistake." "That doesn't mean I can stop it," Paul said, lowering his voice. "I follow chain of command." Marcus nodded. "For now, but chains break when they rust." As he turned to leave, escorted through a tunnel of cameras, someone from the crowd shouted, "This is going viral!" And it was. Down in the concourse, Marcus slipped a small black USB drive into Naomi's waiting hand. "Everything from the terminal system up to the fraud flag," he said. "If Edward thinks he's covering his tracks, he's forgotten who built half the backbone of his firewall." Naomi gave a tight nod and tucked the drive into her encrypted device. Behind them, Malik filmed from a discreet angle as Paul and Karen huddled near the security desk. Edward was now live on a private call. Demanding coordinated narrative containment, Vivian Moore was watching all of it from her suite. Her tablet displayed a list of top-viewed social posts. Black CEO denied flight access, again. Elite ticket, racist treatment, federal silence. Then another clip broke through the chatter. Naomi had just received it. Ryan, the IT staffer, had intercepted a file buried in Prestige's internal reporting system. It was labeled A602M Audit Memo. It detailed irregular booking revenue reallocations across Prestige's first-class cabins, manual overrides favoring select passengers with internal staff codes marked Preferred, Translation, Fraud, Routine, Deliberate, Internal. The kind of document you hide before an audit. The kind of document that ends careers. Naomi's fingers flew across her screen. "Uploading now," she said. Within minutes. Ryan's video appeared on YouTube. A quiet screen share. His voice low but steady. "This is the A602M memo. Prestige Airways has been fraudulently reassigning seats and skimming revenue from first-class bookings for over 2 years. Here's the timestamp. Here's the log of overrides. Here's the admin ID." He paused. Edward Lang. The video surged to 100 million views within the first 2 hours. Reddit caught fire. Aviation watchdogs picked it up. CNBC cut into a live segment. Prestige Airways stock dropped 17% in the first 10 minutes. "We're witnessing a real-time collapse." The anchor said, "This isn't just a customer dispute. It's fraud at a corporate scale." At gate 47, passengers screamed at Karen. One woman ripped her boarding pass in half and threw it on the ground. "I'm not flying with you racists," a man shouted. Paul stood rigid as his radio blared updates from corporate. "Commence damage control, delay boarding, isolate all staff." But it was too late. Marcus had already left the gate, already planted the evidence, already pressed the detonator. Karen's voice trembled now. "We were just following orders." Sarah stepped forward, her voice quiet but clear. No, you followed bias, and it just cost you your airline. Karen turned on her. You'll lose your job over this. Sarah looked her straight in the eye. Then I'll lose it for something right. Cameras clicked. Faces turned. And just beyond the gate, on a large screen broadcasting flight updates, a breaking banner slid across the bottom. Prestige Airways under fire. Federal inquiry imminent after CEO exposes discrimination. Fraud. Marcus didn't look back. He didn't need to. His silence said everything. The system had tried to humiliate him, but it was the system that now stood exposed, corrupted, and cracking, at Prestige Airways headquarters in Atlanta. The air was thick with desperation. Edward Lang stood at the head of the executive conference table, red-faced, one hand gripping the armrest of his leather chair while the other stabbed at the speakerphone. "Control the narrative," he shouted. "Get someone, anyone, on cable to spin this as a tech malfunction." Across from him, executives in tailored suits stared at their tablets in grim silence. Live feeds were everywhere now, Ryan's exposé playing on a loop, Marcus's lounge ejection framed against a racist remark, and viral clips of Sarah's sit-in flooding Facebook and Twitter. Prestige Airways stock had dropped 34% in just under 90 minutes. Booking systems were stalling across the country. One regional hub in Dallas reported complete boarding failure. The system had begun collapsing under the weight of its own deceit. "We have a PR plan," someone said cautiously from the far end of the table. "But we can't run it if internal files are still leaking. There's another video up. Naomi Carter posted it on Reddit. She's confirming employee corruption and data tampering. It's already being reshared by financial blogs." Edward's knuckles went white. "Reddit?" he snapped. "Are we getting taken down by Reddit?" But the silence in the room answered him. It wasn't just Reddit. It was LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and even TikTok, where hashtags weren't needed because faces were already recognizable and injustice needed no algorithm. One director opened a live feed from CNBC on his phone. A scrolling chyron read, "Prestige Airways. Stock crash or scandal." Edward slammed his fist on the table. "Where is the legal team?" "Trying to lock comms," someone replied. "But the leak's internal. The back door into our Slack wasn't patched." "Then patch it," he roared. "I want Carter, Reed, and that damn intern prosecuted." Meanwhile, across the country in a quiet park near Washington National, Marcus Reed sat on a bench in his crisp gray blazer, tapping a message into a secure channel. Beside him, Naomi Carter held up a tablet, eyes focused as she pulled up a dossier labeled Lang E1 Offshore. "Are you ready?" she asked. "We just confirmed Cayman transfers and a numbered Swiss account under Edward's initials. It's clean, it's time-stamped, and it's traceable to the week before the SEC audit avoidance policy change." Marcus gave a single nod. "Let's burn it." Naomi uploaded the data to a dormant internal Prestige channel, still active but no longer monitored closely. From there, the leak flowed like oil on fire. In under 15 minutes, the screenshots hit Reddit's finance forums. Edward Lang funneled $2 million into offshore accounts before blocking audit legislation. The post exploded. Within 30 minutes, it had 3 million upvotes. Financial journalists cross-verified the transfers using public registry data. A Bloomberg reporter tweeted, "This just escalated to a federal level. Prestige Airways may be facing SEC violations and criminal fraud." CNN switched from their usual late-afternoon panel to live coverage from the tarmac at Washington National, where passengers were still grounded due to system-wide boarding failures. Overlays now included Marcus's face, identified not just as a CEO, but a cybersecurity innovator and former Pentagon consultant. Naomi's voice cut through the tension. "The shareholders are moving. One of them's tweeting directly at Edward. They're calling for his resignation." Inside the Atlanta boardroom, the walls were beginning to sweat. Edward stared at the screen where his face was plastered above the words, "Offshore accounts linked to fraud." His voice came out flat. "Get legal on the phone." No one moved. A trembling executive finally stood. "They've stopped taking our calls." Another one slid her tablet across the table. "Look." On it was a poll posted by one of the largest private equity groups backing Prestige Airways. The title read, "Should Edward Lang resign before 8 p.m.?" The vote was 89% yes. Below it, a comment with over 15,000 likes. "He tanked a brand in 12 hours. Time for a new pilot." Edward turned to Paul Carter, who had flown back to HQ after being pulled from the gate. "You were there," Edward said, voice low. "You saw him escalate?" Paul hesitated. "Sir," he said carefully, "we escalated. Karen refused to scan his pass. We flagged him based on assumptions." "So you're turning on me too?" Edward asked. Paul didn't answer, but his silence was louder than betrayal. In the background, screens continued glitching. Airport alerts chimed with apology messages. Boarding apps crashed. Customers flooded Prestige's call centers with demands for refunds. Social media filled with calls for boycotts. "I've flown Prestige for years," one Facebook user wrote, "but I will never give them another dollar after what they did to that man." Shareholders watched in horror as the stock cratered another 28%, dropping to a quarter of its morning value. The financial platform Robinhood froze Prestige shares to prevent panic selling. Meanwhile, in a private Reddit AMA session hosted by Naomi under the handle Equal Wings, she answered the public's questions. One stuck out, "Why now?" Naomi replied simply, "Because silence only protects the guilty." Marcus Reed waited for the right moment. And this was it. From the bench near the fountain at National Airport, Marcus opened his phone and posted a brief message on Reddit. "Prestige's arrogance cost them more than a seat. It cost them their soul. But we can build better. And we will." The post surged through forums like wildfire. Screens across terminals lit up with replays of the boarding incident, spliced with fraud documents and Naomi's voice narrating facts like a prosecutor. Edward Lang stumbled out of the conference room, his tie loosened, his voice shaking. "We'll bounce back," he muttered, but no one followed him. He was a ghost in his own company now. The screen in Prestige Airways' now silent boardroom flickered to life at precisely 6 p.m. On it appeared a live video call, crisp and unmistakable. Marcus Reed, seated calmly at a dark wood desk, framed by the seal of Reed Enterprises behind him. His voice was calm, his gaze unblinking. "Good evening, Edward?" Edward Lang, still in his rumpled blazer and undone tie, didn't respond at first. He leaned forward like a man trying to figure out how much he still had left to lose. Marcus didn't wait. "This call is being recorded and monitored by independent counsel. I won't waste your time. I'm here to offer you a choice." Karen Walsh and Paul Carter were seated beside Edward, their faces drawn, colorless. Paul had stopped defending the company hours ago. Karen, defiant even now, muttered under her breath, "You're lucky you weren't arrested for causing disruption." Marcus didn't even flinch. "The only disruption was the truth, and you tried to bury it under bias, arrogance, and fraud." Edward attempted to cut in. "We've had system errors before. This was a miscommunication at best." "Stop," Marcus said, his tone cut like a wire. "You locked my profile. You tampered with boarding logs. You flagged me as a threat on no legal basis. And most of all, you slandered me before your employees, your passengers, and the entire internet." Karen scoffed. "A man in a suit filming a few videos doesn't scare us." "No," Marcus replied. "But a man in a suit with top-level clearance to the SEC does." A hush fell over the room. Marcus continued. I don't just run Reed Enterprises. I serve as an unpaid senior advisor to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Your offshore accounts, your override codes, your boardroom memos, every one of them is already in the hands of the Department of Justice. Edward's face drained of color. Paul muttered. He's not bluffing. I don't bluff, Marcus said. I build, and today, I dismantled the very system you thought could never be touched. He leaned slightly forward, locking eyes with Edward. You humiliated me in a first-class lounge not because I lacked status, but because I didn't look like what you imagined a VIP should be. You degraded me at the gate not because I broke a rule, but because I broke your illusion. And now, you've lost the very thing you built your empire on, control. Edward slammed his fist on the table. What do you want from us? Karen looked around, as if searching for someone to end the call. No one moved. The staff that had once clung to her commands now sat quietly, watching their careers evaporate in real time. Marcus let the silence stretch for a moment before answering. I want accountability. I want Karen fired. Paul suspended pending review. And I want you, Edward Lang, to resign effective immediately and surrender all back-end access to federal authorities. If you do this within the next hour, I will not personally pursue civil litigation. Your investors may not be so kind. Karen stood, trembling, trying to pull authority back into her frame. This is outrageous. You have no right. But she was cut off by Edward's voice, quieter than it had ever been. You're terminated, effective now. Karen turned sharply. What? You heard me, Edward said, not looking at her. Clean out your credentials. Security will escort you out. She froze for a second, then stormed out, heels echoing like a slow drumbeat of failure. Paul stood up too, but Marcus raised a hand. Not you, he said. You cooperated. Eventually, your suspension is a matter for the board, but I suggest you start writing your report now. Paul gave a quiet nod. Edward looked up. And me? Marcus stared at him. You get to walk out the front door, but not far. At that moment, alarms blared inside Prestige headquarters. Red lights pulsed across the top edges of every office screen. A voice came over the intercom. Federal agents on premises. All employees, remain at your stations. Edward jolted from his seat. What? What is this? Marcus watched the chaos calmly from the screen. That would be the extreme twist I mentioned. Across the building, agents from the DOJ and SEC began entering conference rooms, collecting documents, shutting down servers, and sealing filing cabinets. Outside, news helicopters circled the glass tower. Reporters gathered by the front gates. Agents walked through the lobby, badges raised. Edward tried to stand, but Paul placed a hand on his shoulder. It's over, he said. He really did it. Marcus's voice cut in once more. You tried to define me by the color of my skin, the simplicity of my suit, the idea that power must wear a name tag to be taken seriously. But I defined myself through strategy, through silence, through preparation, and now, you'll remember my name not because you denied me a seat, but because I took your plane down from the tarmac to the tower. The screen went black. Edward sank back into his chair, breathing hard, in the hallway beyond. Karen was being escorted out by federal security. Her badge no longer worked. Her inbox had been locked. Her legacy, such as it was, had been reduced to a meme trending across Instagram with the caption, "You don't belong here." Paul watched it all quietly. He had made his choice too late, but not so late that he was part of the collapse. And as for Marcus, he wasn't watching anymore. He was already planning the next step. Reed Air wasn't just an idea now, it was an inevitability. And the reform of an industry had just begun. It started with a silence, Not the kind that came from order, but the kind born from failure. At 6:42 p.m., less than 12 hours after Marcus Reed had been denied entry to a lounge he rightfully belonged in, the Prestige Airways flight status page went completely dark. Across terminals in Washington, Atlanta, Chicago, and Los Angeles, screens blinked and refreshed, only to display a blanket message in red text. All flights temporarily grounded. Please contact customer support. No one answered the phones. The internal booking system had been shut down by federal order. Agents swept through the IT command center in Atlanta, removing hard drives, tagging computers, and handing warrants to speechless tech directors. Outside, Prestige's signature shuttle buses sat idle while passengers crowded lobbies, some angry, most confused, and many of them live-streaming their reactions. But the true collapse wasn't measured in flight delays. It was measured in credibility. Major investors pulled out within minutes of the raids. By 7:15 p.m., the company's valuation had dropped below $1 billion for the first time since 2006. The airline's brand name, once synonymous with premium luxury and elite access, had become a digital punchline. On Reddit, memes of Edward Lang fleeing his office in a wrinkled suit trended with the caption, "Prestige grounded permanently." Naomi Carter released a single statement to the press. "There are no isolated incidents, only symptoms of unchecked power. We responded with accountability." It was reposted 4 million times. At the heart of it all, Marcus Reed never held a press conference. He didn't gloat, didn't claim victory with champagne or tweets. Instead, he gathered his senior team on a private Zoom call at Reed Enterprises Operations Center. There, he shared what came next. Reed Air. Not a protest, but a promise. Not a replacement, but a reinvention. His new aviation brand would offer a transparency-first experience, real-time seat verification, fair boarding systems, AI-monitored anti-bias protocols, and a zero-tolerance harassment policy for all staff. But beyond the product was the mission. Every pilot, every agent, every executive would go through immersive equity training. Community college students from underserved regions would fly free each summer. Veterans would receive priority boarding, not in words, but through verified commitments coded into the ticketing system. Marcus wasn't building an airline to compete. He was building one to set the bar. Yet amid this bold future, the final twist hadn't landed. At 7:45 p.m., a breaking story hit every major news outlet. Hidden within the files seized at Prestige HQ, agents uncovered a ledger of unauthorized payments routed to shell accounts connected not just to Edward Lang, but to 4 other executives across the airline industry. These weren't just bribes. They were laundering channels tied to fake service contracts, inflated vendor invoices, and in one case, diverted federal grant funds meant for disability access upgrades. The implications were staggering. The Department of Transportation and SEC launched parallel investigations within the hour. Airlines once seen as untouchable were now under review, as CNN's aviation analyst said live on air. What began with a denied lounge pass has now unraveled a network of corruption spanning the entire industry. This is no longer a scandal. It's a reckoning. The clip went viral. Again, in the terminal, where it all began. Sarah, now on administrative leave, stood at a gate window, watching a grounded Prestige jet sit motionless under the pink-orange hues of a DC sunset. She didn't know if she'd return to work. She wasn't sure she wanted to. But as she glanced at her phone, a notification popped up. Marcus Reed invites you to apply for leadership onboarding with Reed Air. She smiled for the first time all day. By 8:30 p.m., the fall was complete. Prestige Airways, once a symbol of corporate exclusivity and high-tier travel, had shuttered all operations under federal directive. Edward Lang had been removed from the building under escort, his name now permanently linked to one of the most public collapses in aviation history. Karen Walsh's termination paperwork had already been sent to every HR department affiliated with Federal Contract Review. Her career, like her clearance badge, had been deactivated. Paul Carter resigned quietly, his last action forwarding a private apology to Marcus Reed, Harold Vance, who had once laughed at the idea of being replaced, found himself trending on social media not as a businessman, but as a symbol of arrogance gone viral. All four faced reputational ruin, professional isolation, and in Edward's case, criminal indictment. But Marcus Reed was no longer watching them. He had moved on, not out of spite, but out of necessity. At 9 p.m., without fanfare, without cameras, Reed Air officially launched its booking site. Within 2 hours, over 400,000 sign-ups flooded the system. A 17-year-old student from Detroit posted a selfie in front of her laptop with the caption, "Just booked my first flight ever. Reed Air made it affordable. This is what equity looks like." Her tweet was reshared by celebrities, journalists, and even a former NASA astronaut who added, "First class isn't a seat, it's how you treat people." But it wasn't just social media that responded. The industry did too. At 9:45 p.m., Horizon Jet, one of Prestige's fiercest competitors, issued a surprise statement. In response to today's events, Horizon will adopt all Reed Air compliance reforms, effective immediately. It was a move no one saw coming. For years, Horizon had resisted change, defending opaque pricing, exclusive lounges, and unchecked discretion at gates. But tonight, faced with public pressure and a new gold standard of ethics, they blinked first, their CEO admitted. Live on Bloomberg, "We could spend years trying to clean up our act, or we could follow someone who's already done the work." The moment sent shockwaves through the industry. Legacy airlines scrambled to revise PR strategies. Travel watchdogs praised the gesture. And Marcus? He said nothing. He let the ripples speak for itself. At a press conference the following morning, held not in a hotel ballroom but outside a community aviation school in Baltimore, Marcus finally stepped forward, wearing the same blazer he'd worn when he was escorted out of that lounge. He addressed a crowd of students, reporters, and former Prestige employees. "Yesterday," he began, "a man with a valid boarding pass was told he didn't belong. That moment wasn't just about race or class. It was about power. Who has it? Who abuses it? And who gets to take it back? I didn't ask for a fight. I asked for fairness. And what I got was clarity." He gestured behind him to the school's new simulator lab, which now bore the Reed Enterprises logo. "We're not here to gloat. We're here to grow. Reed Air will fly not just planes, but possibilities." The applause was soft but steady. In the front row, Sarah sat next to Naomi, both wearing navy blue jackets with small Reed Air pins on the lapel. Malik was there too, camera around his neck, now a full-time media associate for Reed Enterprises. And then, just before he left the stage, Marcus gave one final message. "If you've ever been told you didn't belong, if you've ever been judged before you spoke, or dismissed before you sat, this victory is yours too. Don't let it end with me. Let it begin with you." That clip aired across morning shows, on TikTok and Facebook Reels, and most importantly, in living rooms across America. Elderly veterans in North Carolina shared it with their church groups. Teachers played it in morning advisory classes. A single father in Oakland showed it to his daughter and said, "This is what standing tall looks like." And for those who had been silent before, something changed. So now we ask you, where were you when Marcus Reed turned rejection into reform? If you've lived through a moment like his, if you've ever felt unwelcome where you earned the right to be, share your story, share your strength. And if this journey meant something to you, subscribe and stay with us. Because justice doesn't land in silence. It takes off when we speak.